Okay,
I can hear you, Becky.
And
Becky, I got you.
Thank you.
okay. So are you hearing my microphone in the applicant room? Bonnie's yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So it looks like it's just on.
And Shelley, was there a change to the agenda this evening?
That would be the last item. We will be continuing that item. So
Okay.
when we get to it, we'll do a continuation.
Okay, and
And,
that's by request of the applicant or?
and I'll let Angie explain that one.
Oh, okay. All right, sounds good.
So
Shelby, are you ready to go with the packet? Awesome, thank you. John, is that you? You're coming through just fine.
Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. Can everybody hear me? If you can, just give us a wave. Okay, Deb, are we ready to go then? Okay. We'll call the meeting of the Stearns County Board of Adjustments to order for June 25th, 2020. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we all could join together for that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will do a roll call, and as I call your name, if you could please unmute and let us know that you are present. Jill?
Present.
Mike?
Present.
Dennis?
Present.
Dave? Dave?
Dave Knopfler, yes.
Okay, Dave Gamrath? Okay, we'll come back to that one. Jake
Present.
and Sean.
Present.
All right, is Dave Gamrath with us this evening?
Bonnie, Dave is struggling right now and I'm helping him out.
Okay, he is present, but having some technical errors. All right, and staff this evening, we have Shelley, Angie, Deb, and I'm not sure who else.
Becky, Ag and Water Resources Supervisor,
All right, also Becky, thank you.
and Shelby, and Dave Knopfler.
All right, thank you. All right, in response to the COVID-19 and pursuant to Minnesota Statute Chapter 12 relating to the emergency management, Governor Walz has declared a state of emergency. In response to the state of emergency and in accordance with the Minnesota Statute Chapter 13D.21, all Board of Adjustment members, except for the chair and certain applicants, plan to participate by telephone. In-person public comments will not be heard to conform with the MDH and the CDC guidelines to minimize gatherings. Members of the public were asked to submit comments by 3 p.m. today.
Excuse me, Hoffman, but Scott Elwood, can you mute yourself, please?
Okay, does that help? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, our first item on our agenda this evening is to approve the minutes from the May 28th meeting. We're asking members to please keep themselves muted unless they are in the process of making a comment. So is there a member that would make a motion on the May 28th meeting minutes?
I move we approve the May 28th minutes.
I'll second.
And to help out the secretary, if you could say your name and then make your comments. Thank you. All right, our first agenda item for this evening is to consider a request from Joseph Ike and Melissa Engebretson, Melrose, Minnesota, from section 6.7.5D of the Stearns County zoning ordinance 439 to construct a feedlot structure that is less than 700 feet from a residential structure. The said ordinance requires a 700-foot setback to a residence for an animal feedlot that is registered for 10 animal units or more. The affected property is 46.07 acres of the east half of the southeast quarter of section 35 and 15.7 acres of the west half of the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter and the southwest quarter of the southwest quarter of section 36, track 126 north, range 33 west, Melrose Township. And the property address is 32502 County Road 65, Melrose, Minnesota. And for this application this evening, Joe Ike, I believe, is online with us from one of the other rooms here. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And Joe, we will come back to you for your comments after staff has given us an overview of this application.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll begin by asking if anybody was not able to get out to this site. All right, and for those who made it out, did anybody interact with the property owner while they were out there?
Jill DeLong, yes, I did speak with Joe, and he did show me the location of where he proposes the building to be.
All right. So the property for the first application consists of two parcels totaling 61.77 acres in sections 35 and 36 of the Melrose Township. The property is all zoned A40. The parcels are split due to the location of the section line, but they're deeded together from a contract for deed from 2004. Road access to this property was from 325th Avenue on the north side of County Road 65. The property is currently addressed as 62502 County Road 65 in Melrose, but it's currently being updated to 38101 325th Avenue in Melrose. The feedlot on the property was last registered on October 3rd, 2017 for 99.6 animal units consisting of slaughter steers, feeder cattle, and cow-calf pairs. It was originally registered with Stearns County on September 13th, 2000 for 173 animal units. Staff conducted a compliance inspection on June 2nd, 2020 and deemed the feedlot compliant with Minnesota Rule Chapter 7020 and Stearns County Ordinance Number 439. During an inspection on August 8th, 2017, the feedlot was found to be non-compliant for unpermitted open lot areas with the potential for runoff to impact the river, as well as inadequate manure application records. A follow-up compliance inspection was completed on October 2nd of the same year, and a feedlot permit was issued on October 12th, which resolved all the non-compliance issues. The applicant is now proposing to permit the existing facility for 99.95 animal units consisting of slaughter steers, feeder cattle, cow-calf pairs, and goats, and to construct a 36 by 100 partial confinement barn and a 48 by 100 open lot with runoff control. The proposed setback of 612 feet is a 13% deviation from the 700-foot residential dwelling setback in ordinance number 439. The feedlot is located entirely within the 1,000-foot setback to the city of Melrose, and the proposed structure does not encroach on this setback. The location of any new feedlot structures on this property is also affected by the following setbacks: 50 feet to the property line, 100 feet to a well, 300 feet to a non-agricultural district boundary, and 200 feet to wetlands type 3, 4, and 5. The surrounding parcels are zoned A40 except for those west of the property, which are zoned municipality. The alternatives are to construct the feedlot structure 700 feet from the residential structure. Melrose Township, City of Melrose, Sauk River Watershed, the Star Post, Cold Spring Record, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified. We did receive 2 submitted written testimonies for this application. The first is from Michael Zakowski of 31266 Birch Valley Road in Melrose, Minnesota. And he states, "To whom it may concern, in response to the June 9th notice and after review of the information packet furnished by Amber Milkey on June 17th, I'm in full support of the construction of the feedlot structure proposed and the variance required to do so. I'm the landowner directly south of the Ike residence." And then Joe Arsenault of 109 County Club Road in Melrose submitted testimony for Paul Arsenault, who wrote, "I am Paul Arsenault. I'm good with Joe Ike and Melissa Engebretson putting up a shed for the animals."
Okay, and does that complete the staff's report or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Becky. I just wanted to make a quick clarification or correction. The staff report stated the current address is 62502 County Road 65. It's actually 32502.
Okay, thank you for that correction. And then, Mr. Ike, if you could share with us any comments that you might have in regard to your application.
Just happy that everybody agrees with letting me put their shed up, I guess, with the neighbors and on that stuff. Kind of new to all this. I'm not sure what to say here, I guess.
Well, if we have additional questions, board members, as we go, can ask additional questions. Are there any board members that have questions of the applicant or of staff in regard to this application?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, question for the applicant. I see a map on the screen where we have some shaded areas of where the proposed feedlot should probably not go. What reasons are there for not putting the proposed feedlot closer to your home, which is a clear spot for those hashed areas.
Reason is the way the land and everything, the water drainage is set up and that sort of deal. It would take an extreme amount of dirt work to get a flat pad to do this. So that's why we kind of chose this location up there close to the feed sources and just the other livestock or permitted feedlots, I guess, too.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, a kind of follow-on question, Bill's question. Did you consider moving the structure and feedlot slightly to the north? There seems to be room there which would encroach less on that residential home.
We looked at that. It impedes with the flow of actually filling the one bin and getting equipment in and out of the shed also. We need some distance in there for that stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that has questions for the applicant or staff members?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane. Is the area south of the house between the red and yellow areas, is that farm field where you grow plants or crops?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead to close the public hearing and do findings. Do I have a motion?
Mike Kane, so move.
Jacob Hawk, second.
Bonnie, you're muted.
We'll go ahead with findings. The variance request is construct a feedlot structure that is less than 700 feet from a residential structure. The proposed use is allowed in the zoning districts in which the subject property is located. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, it's zoned A40 and it is allowed to have a feedlot in the A40 zone.
Right, we have one yes. Is there anyone that disagrees with the determination of yes? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number two, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane. 9.3.1 under A40 does allow expansions of feedlots.
Okay, thank you. So we have one yes for number two. Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number two? Hearing none, that will be a unanimous yes. Number three, the variance will be consistent with a comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, yes, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan for land use plan goals and objectives, agriculture, goal 1. Objective 2, preserve highly valued farmland for agricultural pursuits.
Okay, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number three? Hearing none, that will be unanimous. Yes. Number four, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, it's already a farm place with a feedlot. The applicant is just looking to expand that. I think that's a reasonable manner.
Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number four? Hearing none, I'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, there's wetlands on our part of the property, and there's other restrictions based off of where it could go. It is not due to anything that the landowner created. Thank you.
All right, does anyone disagree with yes for number 5? Hearing none, that will be marked unanimous yes. Number 6, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Hain, the character won't change. All the surrounding agricultural areas, A40 around it.
Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 6? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I don't believe economics were a factor in this discussion.
Okay, does anyone disagree with yes for number 7? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. We're ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would move that we approve the variance as requested by the applicant to construct a new feedlot structure 612 feet from a residence.
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we will do a roll call to vote on this item. Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Dave? We'll come back to Dave. Jacob?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And Dave?
Did you hear me?
I did not, but I do now.
Okay.
All right, so that is a unanimous yes. The motion carries to offer the variance as requested. Item number 2 on our agenda for this evening is to consider a request from Victor and Deborah Locken, Kimball, Minnesota, from section 6.2.1N1 of the Stearns County Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422 to not raise the manhole access point to grade as part of a completed existing soil system treatment system certification. The said ordinance requires that as part of the SSTS certification, all manhole access points are to be raised to grade. The affected property is lots 1, 2, and 3 of Longwell Park, Section 10, Track 122 North, Range 29 West of Main Prairie Township. And the property address is 9322 184th Street, Kimball, Minnesota. And with us this evening, Victor and Deb are with us remotely in another room. Am I correct?
You are correct. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
All right, thank you. And if we could have an overview from staff.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The applicants currently own a non-conforming tract of record with a single-family residential dwelling and attached garage. The residential dwelling was constructed in 1984 with the sewage treatment system installed in 1983. This system was replaced in 2009 with the existing septic tank found to be in compliance and a lift tank and new pressure bed installed. At the time of the replacement system being installed, there was not an ordinance requirement to bring the manhole access to the ground surface. In 2017, the applicants applied for a variance, which was granted and received a construction site permit for the replacement of a deck, which was permitted for a screen porch. As part of the permitting and variance process, a compliance inspection was required, and the system was found to be in non-compliance for ordinance requirements. The property is located in the Shoreland Overlay District of Pearl Lake, classified as a recreational development lake. The property is not located in floodplain. Pearl Lake is on the impaired waters inventory for aquatic recreation and fish consumption. The property is in an R1 zoning district. Main Prairie Township, Pearl Lake Lake Association, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Sauk River Watershed District, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. I would ask if all staff, or if board members did not make it to the site, would answer by saying no. And did any of the board members have conversation with the applicants?
Dave, Dennis Gregory, I did have a discussion with both Deb and Victor about the variance request and the issues that they saw with putting a manhole cover in the location that's required.
And this is Bonnie Mossman, the chair, and I also had conversation with Victor, basically the same type of conversation as Dennis indicated.
Dave Gamrod, I did not make it to that site.
All right, thank you to everyone. Is there any more information from staff, or are we ready to hear from the applicant?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I have no other information. We did not receive any correspondence or emails concerning this request.
All right, thank you. And we're now ready for any input that the applicant may have at this time.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So I guess I just want to bring up you all can see the picture that I'm looking at, I guess. So there's a 4-inch diameter PVC pipe. That's what's been used. That's where it generally, or not generally, every year I pump this system out, and it gets pumped through that location. And I have it elevated enough. Right now, it's normally flush with the concrete. I just have it above flush so people could see where it was. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And that cover that's sitting on this view is coming out of our house down our steps. And on the bottom step, it's 24 inches to the center of this. I think that's a 24-inch diameter cover. Not 100% sure on that, but I think that's what I was told was the diameter of the riser that would come up there. But that's the location that, and I would like to have Krippner's here tonight, the excavators are the septic system designer, but they are out of town working, and they said I could call them if needed, but otherwise they're out of town. Otherwise they would have joined me. But this location is where this manhole would come up through that concrete, and I guess Debbie and I, our thoughts are it's really it's an unsightly location, and more important, it's a trip hazard. Neither one of us are getting any younger, and our folks are still around and visit and grandkids, and to have that protrude right there by the front steps would be a detriment, obviously. So, like I said, I do pump this every year faithfully. I've been on the Lake Association for 25 years. I was actually one of board members that we spearheaded to go around the whole lake to get septic systems up to par. So if I felt that I was doing any harm to the environment as far as pollution or a failing system, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would have just fixed it and moved on. But as you said, in 2009, well, this was actually 10 when we applied, I believe, in 9, and it actually was installed in 10. And this is in this location since 84, and it was put there because of the setbacks. I think it was basically mandated that this is where it needed to be because of the 93rd Avenue and our well, and then obviously the lake and the property owners. So there isn't a lot of options of where it can move this tank. So that's how it ended up where it is. So I don't know, Deb, you have anything to add, I guess?
Well, Kurt mentioned when he was looking at it that in order to put that manhole there, they would dig up underneath all that concrete, and thus would that whole structure be unsafe? Those are the front steps to our house. Digging underneath there, anytime you said you mess with stuff underneath a structure like that, the safety of it and just the stability might be impaired. So I just worry about safety, trip hazard, and unsightliness is the main reasons for not wanting to put it there.
Okay, thank you. And if board members have additional questions, they can ask them as we go along. All right. Do board members have any questions for staff or the applicant at this time?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Is there currently a manhole buried under the concrete, or is that something that they would require you to install, is raise up from the tank another manhole?
I would come from the tank. There's nothing, so it'd have to be like a 3 foot, or I'm not sure how deep that tank is, but there needs to be a riser from the bottom of the tank up to this level.
Right, but there's currently not a opening underneath the concrete that's just covered with the concrete.
No,
you would
sir.
have to create a new one.
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, 2 questions for staff. I'll give one at a time. Dave, if you can help us understand the reason for this manhole at the surface requirement. And then, as Victor pointed out, he has another way of pumping the tank. Does that enter into making a difference in that requirement?
Dennis and members of the board, the reason that pumpers are required to pump out of the manhole due to the fact that they can't properly pump a tank and clean it through a 4-inch or 6-inch pipe. So they need to be able to pull the manhole cover off and be able to observe inside the tank. They can't, right now when a pumper looks at a tank, they're also looking to see that the tank is intact. Their responsibility is to inform the homeowner that there's an issue with their septic tank. And that is the purpose of pumping through that manhole cover. And what was your second question, Dennis?
You're basically answering it, but just for not in the sense of I'm trying to debate here, but just wondering, can they use a camera down a smaller hole to check the tank, and can they do back flushing to make sure the tank is clean? I mean, I know you may not be a sewer expert, but just wondering if those are alternative methods.
Well, they could back flush it, but there's still going to be stuff in the corners of the tank that they're not going to be able to see if they're getting it or not.
Okay.
And that's the purpose of pumping through a larger opening. You can't see down the tank through a 4-inch hole.
Yeah. And then my second question, which I didn't ask yet, although I've asked 3 questions already, is the original requirement, as I read the packet, was that they were supposed to be compliant by February of 18. And we're 2 years on from there. Can you give me or us some sense of what happened over those 2 years?
Unfortunately, I can't because I am not the staff person that is involved in sending out letters or notices of non-compliance.
Mark Lateral, Stearns County Environmental. To answer Mr. Gregory's question, I do believe we had been working with the Logans on this non-compliance. Since that original non-compliance certification, we did give them notices. They did have their times to work through that, and we were in the process of potential enforcement action until the request for the variance was made. And so pending the outcome of tonight's request, either the manhole can stay where it's at, or we'll continue to work with the Locans and get the manhole brought to surface eventually.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, I have Bonnie Moss from the chair. I just have one question. In the future, if this system were to fail at that time, I'm assuming that then they would need to bring it up to code if we were to give them a variance. Am I correct on that, staff?
Madam Chair, that would be correct.
Okay, are there any other questions, or are we ready to go to findings?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, question for staff. And I have come across manhole covers in sidewalks and pavement before, and, I've seen many where the manhole cover is flush with the surface. Is there a reason why this manhole cover could not be flush?
Directed to me.
If staff.
I'm sorry, is that, the reason, can I back up one statement here, is the delay has been, I've been working with Kurt and Larry Krippner, and they have equipment that they're getting repaired, because it has to get undermined. They have to dig underneath that whole sidewalk, and we're trying to get, so the steps in the sidewalk do not cave in, because obviously the tank is buried well beneath that. So they got, I don't know what it's even called. Kurt said they're getting some sort of, I don't know if it's an auger or something to get that dirt removed from underneath there as safely as it can, so it doesn't bust away from the house and stuff. And then to figure out where that hole is gonna project from the tank up through there, it's gonna, a lot of work has to be done to do that. So it's, they have some equipment that they're trying to get repaired. That was the last that Kurt had mentioned. So, and I don't remember what it was called, this device or whatever, to try to get that dirt excavated from underneath there. So that's been the delay. And then they got busy and cold came and one thing led to another. So, and then we decided if we could possibly pursue this because of the reasons I explained earlier. And as far as can it be flush, it's just hard to know, I guess. Because we don't know what we're dealing with. It's underneath here and you can't see it when you're digging. If it was just in a yard where you could dig the hole and drop it on there, it would, it wouldn't be, but it needs to line up, and it depends how the top of the tank probably isn't parallel with the bottom of the cement, and the riser could sit a little crooked, right? I mean, you don't know what it's going to look like. It's a kind of a poke and hope, I guess, So I guess I can't answer your question 100%. If it could be flush, yes, it possibly could, but my gut says there's probably a better chance it wouldn't fit very properly, just with how we have to get at it.
Thank you. So question for staff. Again, this is Jill DeLong. Is the requirement from our ordinance just to bring the manhole access point to the surface? There's not an actual, it has to be this many inches from the tank up. It's just has to be at the surface. So if it was a perfect world and it was, really easy to put this manhole cover there, would it be possible to make it flush with its surroundings?
Madam Chair, members of the board, it's possible.
Okay, I wasn't sure if the ordinance specified that it had to be so tall or anything like that. So it's possible to make it flush. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have other questions from the board to either staff or the applicant? I'm hearing none. We'll move on to we'll close the public hearing. Could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mike Haynes, so move.
Is there a second?
Dave Gamrod, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone that is opposed to closing the public hearing? Hearing none, we will take that as a positive vote, and the public hearing is now closed. Question number 1 on findings. To not raise the manhole access point to grade as part of a completed existing SSTS certification. Number 1, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, they are zoned R1, and R1 is allowed to have a septic tank. Thank you.
Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 1? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous. Number 2, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, as Jill mentioned, R1 is reserved for residential development. Sewer systems are part of that, so this is in harmony.
All right, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 2?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe that the variance is not in harmony, as Dave Knafla said that it's for compliance inspection and to be able to inspect the tank, and it does not sound like that would be an ability if we approve a variance. So I am a no.
Okay, hearing a difference of opinion on this one, we will do a roll call. Wait just a moment. I need to find my list. Okay, Jill is a no on this one. Mike, I believe you made the motion. Am I correct?
It was Dennis that made the motion.
Okay, Dennis made the motion. All right, so Jill is a no. Mike?
Yes.
Dennis? You seconded it or made the motion. Myself, I am voting yes. Dave?
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
and Sean.
Yes.
All right, we will mark that as a yes with one no vote of Jill. Item number 3, variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, Goal 7, Objective 1, evaluating land use changes based on how they respond to the existing natural systems and their potential impacts on the natural resources. I don't think putting a manhole cover on here will change the impact on the natural resources. So I do think it is consistent.
All right, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 3? Hearing none, I will mark that as unanimous yes. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner.
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn. This certainly seems like a reasonable use to me. I've been dealing with it as it is. It's not a problem. It's not an issue. I'll have to make him go through all the work and expense to try to change this. It seems unreasonable to me.
All right, for number 4, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 4? We'll mark that as a unanimous yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, this was a system that was found compliant in 09 or 10. And since that time, the regulations have changed. And so the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to this property, given the system was put in before the regulations changed.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone that does not agree with yes for number 5? Hearing none, I'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 6, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality.
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, the character won't change a bit based on this manhole or not.
Okay, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 6? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations. I think it does. They talked about, safety factors of putting something in that's not level. And besides that, as far as digging underneath, that could affect the steps and different parts of the current home structure. So I think that would be of a concern to them, and economics may have been part of it, but was not the sole concern. Anyone disagree with yes for number 7? I'm hearing none. I'll mark that as unanimous yes. We are ready now for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would make a motion to approve the variance to not bring the manhole access point to the ground surface for the completion of a compliance inspection.
Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, I'll second that.
All right, we'll go through roll call. Jill?
Yes.
All right, and Mike made the motion. Mike and Dennis made the motion and seconded it, and I'm voting yes. Dave?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
All right, we have a unanimous yes. So the motion carries, and you have been granted your variance. Okay, our next item for this evening is number 3, is to consider a request from Dwayne and Denise Horst of Sauk Center, Minnesota, submitted by Scott Elwood from Section 6.5 of the Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422 to use a holding tank as the subsurface sewage treatment system for another establishment, a butcher shop. The said ordinance does not allow for the use of the holding tanks to be used as a subsurface sewage treatment system for other establishments. The affected property is 10.01 acres of the east 782 feet of the north 557 feet of the northwest quarter of Section 8, Track 125 North, Range 35 West of Raymond Township, and the property address is 48925 370th Street, Sauk Center, Minnesota. And I believe this evening we have Scott Elwood was calling in on behalf of the property owner. Am I correct?
Yes.
We will come back to you for your comments after staff has given us an overview.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the property owner owns the 10.01 acre tract that has a single-family residential dwelling, detached garage, and 2 other accessory structures, which was purchased in 2019. The property owner is proposing to convert the 30-foot by 48-foot accessory structure into a meat processing facility, agriculturally oriented business. The accessory structure was constructed in 1995 per the assessor's records. The proposed conversion will include a restroom and wash sinks. The proposed system will consist of 2 2,000-gallon holding tanks with an electronic high water alarm. There is also proposed 2,000-gallon holding tank with an electronic high water alarm for floor drain waste, which is by rule non-domestic waste. The applicant and the subsurface sewage treatment system designer are proposing to use the holding tanks as the sewage treatment system because of the type of wastewater that would be generated, because of the low water use from the restroom, the high biological oxygen demand, and suspended solids generated from washing utensils associated with the proposed use. Pre-treatment of the waste would be required and monitoring of the waste stream, which would classify the system as a Type 4 subsurface sewage treatment system. In May 2001, a sewage treatment system was installed or issued for the residential dwelling. In June 13th of 2008, Raymond Township issued a permit for a deck to be added to the residential dwelling. In July 15th, 2019, the septic system compliance inspection for the property transfer was submitted. The property is not located in the Shoreland Overlay District. The property is in an A160 zoning district, and agriculturally oriented businesses are allowed by conditional use permit. The impervious lot coverage of the property is approximately 13,000 square feet or 3%. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property serving the residential dwelling is compliant per compliance inspection P-013722 completed on July 10th, 2019. The alternative would be to install a Type 4 system, which would require pre-treatment and monitoring due to the potential for high-strength waste. Raymond Township, the Sauk River Watershed District, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And Madam Chair, members of the board, the applicant has applied or submitted an application for a conditional use permit for the egg-oriented business. I would ask how many staff members did not go to the site, and if any of the board members had conversations with the property owner.
Dave Gamrod, I did not make it.
Okay, it sounds like everyone else made it and had no contact with the applicant. We'll now go to the applicant's representative, Scott Elwood. if you would like to make any comments that you have for us.
Yeah, I just want to express that with this meat processing plant, I've designed for other meat processing plants in the past, and it will have high strength waste, and we would have to put a pretreatment system on this. And not knowing what the flows are going to be, we just can't go out of the book and say, you know, this is what this facility is going to use for water. And if we don't have accurate flow numbers, we can't design a proper pre-treatment system for them that's actually going to function properly. So I propose that we use the holding tanks to be able to determine what those flows are, so that if this turns into a successful business and we need to add pre-treatment and a septic system in the future, we'll at least have some data and some information that we can go off of to determine what their needs will be.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from the board members before we close the public hearing?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I have a question for staff, just a clarification to understand. So is if there were no variants, that would mean that they'd be installing the pre-treatment situation, but because they're installing the tank, that's what the variance is for? Or is it because that it's going to be a combined, animal processing waste and also a human bathroom waste that is requiring the variance?
If staff could comment on that, please.
Madam Chair, members of the board. So the two 2,000-gallon holding tanks are going to be for the water that's generated from the restrooms and washing utensils and washing hands, so on and so forth. That is sewage by definition. But there is also going to be blood, other stuff that's associated with the business of running a butcher shop going into that system. It's only going to be the property owner that's manning the butcher shop. So the waste coming out of the restroom, is going to be minimal. The holding tank for the floor drains, anything that goes into a floor drain is considered non-domestic waste and is not considered sewage, so that it has to be dealt with separately, and it does not require a permit for a septic system.
Okay, thank you. So just to make sure I'm understanding it, so the variance will be, on the diagram on the screen, we have 3 holding tanks. The top 2 combined, and then the floor drain tank. So this variance is for the floor drain tank. Is that correct?
No, it is for the 2 holding tanks for the restroom, because the floor drain the holding tank for the floor drain waste is non-domestic. It's not sewage. The holding tanks, the 2 holding tanks for the restroom and the wash sinks, that is by definition sewage and has to be treated as such, but per ordinance, another establishment cannot use a holding tank for a sewage treatment system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like it's the variance is for the top 2 combined holding tanks, and it's because it would have human waste in there, and it's a other establishment. If it was just animal waste, it would not be sewage, so it would be fine to be a holding tank. It's only because there might be human waste that goes in there, and that's why it requires. Is that correct?
Partially.
Madam Chair, if I may, the variance is required because the Stearns County zoning or sewage treatment ordinance does not allow holding tanks for commercial establishments. This being a meat processing center, the variance is actually to allow the holding tanks for that commercial facility. The fact that the two tanks are going to serve as the collection vessels for the restroom and the wash down sinks from the debris of animal processing, that's going to capture that waste. And as Dave said, that waste specifically by rule is considered sewage. And that's why it needs to be treated as such. The single tank is non-domestic waste, floor drains. Staff can write a permit for that as a non-domestic holding tank, and that would not be a problem. But the other two tanks would require the variance in order to be used as a holding tank. Otherwise, it would require a full system be added to it, which I think Mr. Elwood has already expressed why that may not exactly kosher.
I have a question for Mr. Elwood, Bonnie Mossman. Will the restroom facilities there be used primarily by employees, or will the public have access to those restrooms? If they're coming, I'm not sure if they're going to be selling anything over the counter, or if this is just more an operation where you butcher an entire animal for a particular family, rather than selling a few roasts or a few steaks over the counter, in which I would assume the general public then would have access to the restrooms.
There's going to be no retail facility here at all. It's going to be just for his use. It's just one employee. It's just him, and it's just a restroom for him. And then any future employees if they were to have them. So no commercial or no customers.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, question for the applicant. Is this meat processing or butchering shop going to be a full-time business, or is it just a side business?
This is eventually going to be his full-time business.
Okay. So then a follow-on question to that, Scott, if it's a full-time business and there are a number of these in Stearns County and elsewhere in the state of Minnesota, would we not know the flow that would go out of a facility of this size?
Not necessarily. It all depends upon how successful they are. Because I've got some that are larger than this that I've worked with, and then I have some that are smaller than this that I've worked with, and they're kind of unpredictable on how each facility uses water differently, and it's hard to determine. Taking one facility, because most of them do have retail, and this one does not.
There must be some anticipation with the 2,000-gallon tanks. How often you need to pump those? What was your estimated flow for this system?
That was actually the customer's request to do that. They actually only needed to do one single 2,000, and to help the process along, they decided they wanted to do the two just to make sure, because if we ever did do a future system, then we'd have some of the tanking in place to take care of that. So they thought they'd just invest the money right away into the two tanks. And I'm just estimating at 175 gallons of water a day, which literally is throwing a dart at a board. So that's the number I used for designing this.
Okay. And Scott, one last question then. What is the difference in cost between a Type 4 system and the Type 2 system that's being recommended here?
Oh, it's very substantial, because it could be tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, most of the type of pre-treatment system we'd have to use on this that I've used with other meat processing plants. They were bigger ones, but they were just for the unit themselves were probably about $15,000 just for the unit. That's not installed. That's nothing. That's just buying it. And this, you're probably going to set both these tanks for probably 8 or 10,000, and this, you know, or 8,000 to set these two tanks probably.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, any additional questions before we close the public hearing? Do we have a motion to close?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'll make that.
I'll second it.
Was that second, Mike?
Yes, Mike, second.
All right. So is there anyone that objects to closing the public hearing? Hearing none, we will take that as a yes vote, and the public hearing is closed, and we will move on to findings of fact. Number 1, this is a variance request to use a holding tank as a SSTS for an other establishment, a butcher shop. Number 1, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the property's zoned A160, which does allow for sewage treatment tanks.
Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 1? Hearing none, we'll mark it as unanimous. Number 2, variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, this is Mike Kane. Under section 1.2.1, under the subsurface sewage treatment system, it provides minimum standards for installing these systems to be in harmony with the codes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 2? Hearing none, we will mark that as a unanimous yes. Number 3, the variance will be consistent with a comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'm going to say that yes, it is consistent when it comes to the economic development plan to maintain and strengthen economic diversity, which is goal 1, objective 2, to encourage industrial development within the existing community.
All right, is there anyone that disagrees with a yes for number 3? Hearing none, we'll mark it as unanimous. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the property owner is getting a conditional use permit for this business. It's a meat processing plant, which is tied to agriculture. He's in an A160 zoning district. I believe that it is a reasonable manner to use the property.
Thank you. Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 4? Hearing none, we'll mark it as unanimous. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, I believe because the landowner is starting small, a sole proprietor business, no customers, over-the-counter retail, and no employees at this time, that I believe that it's more of a hobby-based business and not a full-blown business where he would have other businesses to look at for the uses and flows and so forth for the regular system. So at this time, I think it's appropriate.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number 5? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous. Number 6, the variance, if granted, maintains the essential character of the locality.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the locality is agriculture, and this is an agriculture-oriented business. He's repurposing an existing building to do this, and then everything else is underground. I believe that it will not change the character of the locality.
Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 6? All right, then number 7, so that will be unanimous yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no? Well, I'm going to say that I believe economics were discussed as part of it, but I think because of all of the unknowns, economics were not the sole reason for it. And it's admirable that the applicant is putting in the 2 tanks so that in the future, if he does need a septic system, he's showing good faith in that he's preparing for that possibility. Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 7? Hearing none, I will mark that as unanimous yes, and we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, before we make a motion, if I could ask a question, please. And so when Scott was describing what would happen, we have the 2 tanks in, and then eventually we might need a pre-treatment system. Is there a particular tipping point when that naturally occurs, or do we need to put something in our motion as a condition that when they get to a certain size that they need to install a pre-treatment system?
I'm guessing that's probably a good question for Scott and for staff. They could respond to that.
What we're going to use these holding tanks for is an opportunity to be able to test that waste strength. And so once we get a test on that waste strength, then we'll know what kind of pretreatment system that we need to put in, if we even need one at all. It could be to the point where, we have certain levels that we have to maintain in our waste strength going out to our treatment area. And if through this tanking we're able to meet that, then we don't need pretreatment. And by having these holding tanks in place, we can do that level of testing. I believe that the holding tanks will become a non-viable option once the property owner cannot afford to keep pumping them. I mean, so if his volumes do increase to a point where he's having to pump those tanks out every couple of weeks, I'm sure he'll be giving us a call saying, hey, we got to do something different here because this is getting to be way too expensive. And then we'll have to do something different.
And thank you for your patience here, but one kind of follow-on question to that. So this variance only allows the 2 tanks, or if they want to put in a 3rd and 4th tank, could they do that with this variance?
If staff could comment on that, please.
Madam Chair, members of the board, if that he would need to apply for a permit to install another tank, at that point, we would probably want to design for some type of soil treatment area to be associated with that permit. Right now, the permit or the variance is just for the 2 holding tanks. You won't be able to add another tank off of this variance.
Correct. Madam Chair, if I may, as Dave has answered, it would be just for these 2 holding tanks. I also concur with Mr. Elwood that at the point of it not being feasible to run on a holding tank would become an economic decision where he'll be pumping them out more often than the applicant desired. And at that point, then we'd be looking at adding a complete system. So.
Good, thank you. With that, Madam Chair, thank you for your patience. I would make a motion that we approve the variance to install two 2,000 gallon holding tanks as the subsurface sewage treatment system for the meat processing facility.
Madam Chair, may I just ask one more question? Does this need to be conditioned upon them receiving the conditional use permit for the building?
I'm guessing that it probably wouldn't become a mute issue if he doesn't receive a permit for the building.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, in the variance, we're saying it is for a meat processing facility, and I don't believe it can be a meat processing facility if it's not permitted for that use. So it sounds like we don't necessarily need that CUP in the variance.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, are we ready then to move ahead with your motion?
I am fine moving ahead. I'm also, if it's the wishes of the board, I'm happy to add a condition as well that they need to get a CUP, prior to installing the holding tanks.
Okay, thank you. And then do we have a second or a request for additions to the motion?
Mike Kane, I will second that as is.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion to approve. I will do a roll call. I'm assuming that Dennis and Mike are both yes as they made the motion. Jill?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Dave?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
And Sean?
Yes.
We have a unanimous motion or a unanimous vote to approve. You can check with staff during business hours as if you have any additional questions about your permit. All right, for item number 4 is to consider a request from Robert and Lorena Weber, Forest City, New York, and Trevor and Bridget Grubby of Issaquah, Washington, from sections 5.1.2C2 and 10.2.11A1A of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439 to add a second story and change the roof pitch on a legal non-conforming residential dwelling that does not meet the required structural setback to the OHWL of Pierce Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. The said ordinance does not allow for the expansion of a non-conforming structure and requires that additions or alterations to the non-conforming structure meet the required structural setback of 200 feet from the OHWL of lakes classified as natural environment. The affected property is Lot 13, Block 1 of Pierce Lake Estates, Section 5, Track 122 North, Range 31 West of Eden Lake Township, and the property address is 19408 of Pierce Lake Road, Painesville, Minnesota. And I believe that on the phone we have Jolene Gardner and Jeremy Schammel. And we also have some people that would have some public, excuse me, I'm on the wrong item. We would have Robert Weber tonight via a phone call for this application. Robert, are you there?
Yes.
All right, we will come back to you for your comments once staff has the chance to make their report. So staff?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the applicants recently purchased a property that is a non-conforming tract of record with the existing residential dwelling and deck. The residential dwelling is a legal non-conforming structure as it does not meet the required structural setback to the ordinary high water level of Pierce Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. Also, a building line cannot be established as the lot adjacent is vacant. The applicant is proposing to change the roof line to a steeper pitch, add a bonus room, and change the direction of the peak. The current roof line runs southwest to northeast and has a flat roof over a portion of the structure. The applicants are proposing to run the roof line southeast to northwest to cover the whole structure to include a bonus room, which would increase the living area by approximately 400 square feet. A sewage treatment system permit was issued for a holding tank on June 6th of 1975. A construction site permit was issued for an 8x32 addition on the lake side of the current structure and deck on the northeast side of the structure behind the established building lines. A construction site permit was issued for a deck behind the established building line in October 1978. A compliance inspection of the holding tank was completed in 2007. A subsurface sewage treatment system permit was issued for the installation of holding tanks in 2008. And in 2023 of this year, a compliance inspection was received for the holding tanks for the property transfer. The property is located in the shoreland overlay district of Piers Lake, is not located in floodplain, and Piers Lake is not on the list of impaired waters. The property is zoned R1. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property is compliant per compliance inspection P-015391, completed on March 17th of 2020, and is sized for 2 bedrooms and consists of two 1,500-gallon holding tanks. The current impervious lot coverage is approximately 14.8%. The alternative to the requested variance would be to replace the existing roof to the exact dimensions. Eden Lake Township, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Sauk River Watershed District, Piers Lake Association, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. I would ask if any board members did not make it to the site to speak up. And did anybody have any conversation with the property owner during their site visit?
Dave Gamrod, I didn't make that site.
Okay, thank you. If Mr. Weber, if you have comments you'd like to share with us now?
Hi, good evening. So just by way of introduction, myself and my sister Bridget and our spouses bought the cabin. We grew up in the area, still have family there. Went to Painesville High School, Painesville School Systems, and we purchased a cabin really for a seasonal cabin. So when we come back to visit the area, we can enjoy it. After we purchased the cabin and we're looking at it, the roof itself had a lot of snow on it. When the snow started melting, there was water that seeped through. And so we need to repair that roof. When we were looking at repairing of the roof, if we left the slope as it is, we don't believe that it would last very long. Seasonal cabin, enough snow on there, snow will sit there, it'll be heavy, etc. So what the recommendation was is to try to make more of a slope on the roof itself. And so that was the main purpose of us starting to work with the Environmental Services from Stearns County. Much appreciate the help that Dave and others provided for that. To say how can we make a roof that's sturdy, good, but yet staying within the all the various compliances, et cetera, and various considerations for the property itself. So we thank you for your consideration on this matter and happy to answer any questions people may have.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any questions for staff or for the applicant at this time?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, a question for staff. In 1982, and I'm thinking the date probably was 1988, there was a building line established at that point, and now a building line cannot be established, was there a structure there that was torn down? And if it was, can we rely on the old building line that was established?
Madam Chair, members of the board, to answer that question, that was an interpretation of the shoreland ordinance at that time, where they didn't take into account if the lot next door is vacant, if there was a line that could be established with structures, even if they were on 2 lots away, they would use that as the building line. Now, if we have a lot adjacent that is vacant, our interpretation is there cannot be a building line established.
I appreciate that explanation. And so if the way we approach this hadn't changed, would they need a variance for this change because it would be behind that original building line? If that was still a valid building line, or would this still need a variance because it's a non-conforming residential dwelling?
If staff could possibly comment on that?
Madam Chair, we would have to do a history of the properties. So I'm looking at the aerial photo. So the property that's 2 doors south, Bridget Rigstad, I can't tell you when that structure was constructed, or can I tell you when the structure on the property to the north, John Tice? Again, it's going to determine what structures were there historically, and if there was anything constructed new that may affect the building line.
Okay, thank you, staff. Additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong. So are building lines from the lake or the waterway, or is it from the roadway?
Madam Chair, members of the board, so when we establish a building line, there's, depending on the situation, the most normal way is the 2 structures on either side of the property that's requesting to do a project. We would take the closest corner to the property to the shore and draw a line, and that would be the established building line.
Thank you. Jill DeLong again, question for staff. I understand that the property is not on a list of impaired waters, but it is within the required structural setback to the ordinary high water level of Piers Lake. And it sounds like from their application that they will be mitigating some water damage to the building. Will there be any kind of engineered drainage water mitigation happening with this construction?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the water damage was from ice. We discussed with the property owner the possibility of guttering. He is approximately 120 to 150 feet back from the lake. The structural setback is 200.
And I have a question for staff. Changing the pitch of the roof to the different direction, changing the pitch of the roof and the direction of the roof, what effect will that have on, compared to the current runoff from this structure?
Well, right now, the pitch of the roof, so the runoff currently goes directly towards the lake from half the structure. By changing the pitch of the roof, it actually would go to the side yard property lines or towards the side yard.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? We're hearing none. I believe we're ready to do close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to close?
Dave Gamrod, I'll make a motion to close.
Do we have a second?
Sean Blackburn, I'll second that.
Is there anyone opposed to closing the public hearing at this time? I'm hearing none. The public hearing is now closed. We're ready to do findings for this request to add a second story and change of roof pitch on a legal non-conforming residential dwelling that does not meet the required structural setback to the OHWL of Piers Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. Number one, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, the property is located in the R1 zone, and you are allowed to do remodeling construction in R1 construction zone.
Is there anyone that disagrees with a yes for number one? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number two, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe it will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent, which is mostly to not increase any damage or increase any impact we have on the natural surroundings of the building, since we're actually going to be improving the water drainage on the building by changing the roof pitch, and the applicant has tried very hard to keep the changes to the building minimal to still meet their needs, but also to meet our permit needs. I believe it is in harmony with the general purposes.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number two? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number three, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'm going to say it is consistent. This application can be looked at in the land use plan, growth and development goal 4, objective 1, to recognize and respond to community needs.
All right, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number three? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number four, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, I believe it's reasonable for the new owners of the property to want to fix it up to make it a safe and habitable place for them to stay when they visit in the summers.
All right, is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number four? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number five, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, this certainly does appear to be unique to the property situation. The way he bought it, as it is, and wanting to improve that certainly makes sense.
All right, does anyone disagree with yes for number five? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number six, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the character of the locality will not change at all. We're just barely raising the roof a little bit. It's mostly obscured by the hill behind it to the road. It should not change anything.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number 6? Okay, hearing no disagreements, I will mark that as yes for number 6. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I don't believe economics was a discussion. And so it does involve more than economic considerations.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number 7? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Then we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I'll make a motion that we approve the variance for the applicant to add a second story and change the roof pitch on a legal non-conforming residential dwelling that does not meet the required structural setback to the ordinary high water level.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, I'll second that.
All right, thank you. I will assume that Mike and Dennis's are yes on the vote then. Jill?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Dave?
I'd have one question for staff on this. Is there a height limitation on the roof pitch or top of the maximum height?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the maximum height in shoreland is 30 feet for structures.
Okay. I vote yes.
All right, Jacob?
Yes.
And Sean?
Yes.
All right, hearing unanimous yes, motion carries, and this variance request has been approved. Looking on to item number 5, the applicant has requested that we, was it continued or tabled? Continued till the next meeting. They would like to make some changes to their application. So we just need to have do we need to vote to approve that? All right, if we could have a motion to approve the continuation of item number 5 to the next meeting.
Madam Chair, Gregory, I'll move to continue this item to the next meeting.
All right.
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, second it.
All right, and is there anyone opposed to carrying this item on to the next meeting? Hearing none, we will go with a unanimous yes on carrying over item number 5 to the July meeting, and I'm sure staff will take care of if there's any 60-day rule problems. Staff will take care of that to make sure that we are on board with that. The next item on our agenda, we're going to turn this over to staff as they have some input for us this evening.
We can't hear Angie speaking.
Deb, can you come in here? Angie's computer has issues.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'll start over. We are in front of you tonight to talk about a request that the Board of Adjustment had for us a few months back. At one of your meetings, we had talked about shoreland variances and how many times, including like the last item, there's discussion about water management or mitigation and what should we require, and the Board of Adjustment wasn't entirely comfortable with making certain recommendations. So We explored a couple of different options for you, and Greg Berg with the Soil and Water Conservation District is joining us tonight as well. And so we can talk to you about our discussions with Shelley Benson, our director, Dennis Fuchs, the director of the SWCD. So what I'm going to start out with talking about first is basically the facts related to the Board of Adjustment having the ability to place conditions on variances, which is probably just repeat for many of you, but it is enabling statute that you are allowed to, and actually in some cases require property owners when appropriate to address stormwater management, reduce impervious, increase setbacks, etc. So it's within the realm of your jurisdiction to be doing that for variances. As you know, the Board of Adjustment has a policy that if a request is going to exceed lot coverage, they are required to have a engineered stormwater management plan. So that would not change under this proposal, that would remain the same. So by way of analysis, in last year, 2019, we had 25 variances in shoreland, and I won't read through these, but I've identified what these are for. So we've had ordinary high, shore impact zone, bluff impact zone, etc. Okay, all right. Thank you for your patience. I'm trying to get used to this new computer here. Actually, Deb, I would need somebody to move the monitor on my computer since I don't have access to that now. Okay. Move it up. So alternatives for the Board of Adjustment would be status quo, other way, down, would be status quo, just continue as we are with enforcing our policy. If there's impervious lot coverage issues, then require a stormwater management plan. And then as the Board of Adjustment sees fit to add requirements such as maybe a gutter, or if you remember back at a couple meetings ago, you had required engineered stormwater plan when a property was in the floodplain, etc. So you could continue to do that. I think I heard a little bit of struggle with that, and that's kind of why we wanted to come with you, to you with some examples. The second alternative, which is why Greg is joining us tonight, is to explore SWCD's role in reviewing certain variance applications. And so Greg can talk a little bit about what his board discussed related to that. And then thirdly, it would be to amend the county ordinance to adopt a more, I would say, comprehensive or complicated process for mitigation. So in your packet, I gave you some examples. Aiken County, Minnesota is one example that you have to have certain point criteria to move forward to a Board of Adjustment, and then you're required to do certain things. So those are really your three options. If you choose option 2 or 3, we would talk to our county commissioners just to let them know the direction that the Board of Adjustment is going. Obviously, number 3, amending the ordinance would be something that they would be heavily involved with, because they would be the ones to make the final change. So that's really where we're at. We were hoping to have this to you sooner, but with COVID and workload and things like that, we're getting it to you tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg if he would like to offer his suggestions, and if the Board of Adjustment wants to think on it and talk about it more next month, we can sure do that as well.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Again, this is Greg Berg with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Some of you may know me, some may not. I've been with the district for almost 20 years and done a lot of stuff in shoreland and do a lot of stuff around lakes and streams. So in this request, we talked with the SWCD board about this, and it was a very positive discussion with them. Because our role is really to try to assist the county wherever we can and assist private property owners as much as we can. And so the discussion went all the way from, do we help to, do we just provide technical assistance, or do we actually provide technical assistance and give incentives as far as financial assistance to even applicants to try to get them to do over and above what they might normally do, or to get them to do conservation practices while they're doing their project. And basically what it ended up with was, with review with our board as well as the Board of Water and Soil Resources, which kind of oversees us a lot on our funding mechanisms or our grant funds, we made the decision and were directed that we should not use any financial resources for this type of activity, but we could play a role in helping out with the technical side of it. So you might wonder how that might look, and I don't know that we're sure, but I think the idea would be is that if there was an application, like David got it, let's say, he would discuss that with me, and we'd try to find a date or dates per month, in advance of when the application becomes or comes before you, excuse me. And we would try to meet with the property owner to go over the project as well as options they may have for mitigation. And that mitigation could be dealing with stormwater, it could be doing restoration of the lake shore, it could be even using some of the existing topography. So in some cases, we don't always have to spend a lot to route the water maybe away from the lake or into a depression or something like that, to try to deal with it. So these can be fairly simple, and I think that most of the time, if we were, the Soil and Water Conservation District was to be involved, these would be recommendations where we would draw something up or have something on paper so that we could verify that it was completed by the applicant, but it wouldn't necessarily be an engineered plan. I think if you were still going down the road that it was a complicated enough project that they needed some engineering or an engineered plan, that would still be something where they'd have to hire a private engineer and work through that process. So basically, I think that the main thing would be is to view the site, take a look at it, make a recommendation to you if mitigation was something you were entertaining, and then have that be a condition of the approval or the variance that you're granting. The one other thing I'd like to mention is I did look at quite a few of the examples from some of these other counties as far as performance-based approaches, and I think they're okay. But the one thing that I don't like about that is that they don't always fit the property. Every property is different, and I think that it makes a difference on what you might do. And just because they're meeting the performance standards doesn't necessarily mean that it's meeting, gonna actually match the lot and what's happening with runoff or restoration of the lake, or it might just not be the best option for that property. And I think we could make some sense on some ideas or concepts that a landowner could use that wouldn't break the bank, but also help the resource. I'll quit rambling and see if there's any questions, or Angie can tell me if I missed anything, because she's good at that anyway.
This is Jill DeLong. Thank you very much. And thank you, Angie. I know I was one of the people asking for this, so I really appreciate you taking that seriously. And thank you, Greg, for coming up and thinking about that. So you were saying that there'd be no financial resources for this activity. So just thinking budget-wise, I mean, a person going to the site from the SWCD, that is time. And so time does cost money for a resource to go there. So what kind of budget requirements would that mean? Because it would cost time and money, even if we don't put a dollar. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over this because I work with it all the time. And so when I was talking about financial resources, that was for actual construction of practices. So we would not put any financial resources into actually routing water or creating a rain garden or, maybe having gutters go a certain direction or plants on their lake shore or something like that. We would not have funds for that if it was required as part of the variance. So your point is valid in that, my time or SWCD time, does cost money. I mean, they do pay me to do my work. And we wouldn't, at this time, the district would not propose to charge anything for my time to assist on this activity. So it would be something that we would just do as part of our role in assisting the county on looking at these sites and making recommendations and coming up with some type of plan. We haven't decided exactly what that might look like, but we could use some of the first sites as examples to come up with kind of a template, to something that you would become familiar with reading and what it might look like.
Greg and Angie, Dennis Gregory. Greg, I would absolutely agree with your thoughts on number 3. I don't think it's a good option at all. I think it really would just put us in another corner that, as you indicated, we wouldn't be able to assess the unique needs of that particular property. So I really like number 2, the option number 2. But I think further on number 2, and maybe this is implicit in what you were saying, a lot of times when we talk about water mitigation, I have the fear that when we pass a motion with a condition, that we've just made the property owner spend an inordinate amount. And so it would be very helpful to understand the options, what the estimated cost would be of those options, and what we're trying to accomplish, and whether that's a reasonable cost to accomplish that. And so I liked your comment as well about, working with the landowner to try and save the money. But I also think it's ultimately should be still the authority of the Board of Adjustments to decide whether a condition on the variance is needed, and if it's needed, which is the most effective and efficient option to choose, which is where I think you and your staff can really help us.
Yeah, I think what could happen there is that if we had a rough idea of what we're proposing, we could do what we call just like a staff or a technician or our engineer's estimate, so to speak. And that wouldn't be something that would be valid for them to use necessarily, but it would be a rough idea of what you think it might cost. So when we're designing a project for a landowner, when they voluntarily work with us, we commonly come up with an estimate based off from our plan of what we think it might cost. And that's just based on averages of projects that we see. So we could give you an idea so that you know if it's 5,000 or 25,000 that you're kind of getting them in the ballpark of what they might be doing. Now, there's going to be some variability on who they're hiring and who they're using and all that type of thing for a contractor on actually what their cost is going to be at the end, but that's kind of up to the landowner at that point. So, I mean, I think we can assist with that. And to be honest with you, I'm going to be pretty, I don't want to say lenient, but realistic on what we might recommend if I'm looking at these sites. So I think a lot of times, if there's a natural area or a low depression that's on the property, let's use that rather than trying to excavate a new one. Or, like I said, direct the water to the road ditch away from the lake or something like that, rather than something more complicated that needs to be built. And even sometimes, I'm just talking to these landowners about, we need to shut the lawnmower off at some point and have some more natural vegetation that's going to do some good on filtering water and all the other things that provides as far as benefits.
Madam Chair, sitting right by me, Angie Berg. So Dennis, to your point, I wholeheartedly agree that the department wants to see this as being Board of Adjustment driven and not staff driven. So the idea would be that Board of Adjustment staff would coordinate with SWCD for the things in the process that Greg just mentioned. and to you would come recommendations, but not that we would be recommending any one particular action. It would be more or less to give you options, so that really what I've seen over the last 6 months is that there's been some times where a variance is conditioned with a condition that they have an engineered stormwater plan, and that's because I've asked for that. But that also, having an engineer design a plan significantly increases their cost. So I think the idea is with some of these simpler projects, perhaps having SWCD involved, give some ideas. Not having an engineered plan is going to save people money if the Board of Adjustment chooses to require a condition. So hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely, Angie, and that's exactly was my fear of engineered plans, of how expensive and what kind of financial burden we're putting that applicant under. The other question that I have is, on occasion, we will look for them to plant trees, right? Either for privacy or for viewing or whatever. And I realize that has nothing to do with the water, but is that something SWCD could provide some feedback on as well? Because again, we make up these things like, well, it should be X feet high and it should be this kind of tree, and none of us are arborists.
Madam Chair, Dennis, I can touch on that just a bit. So Greg, what Dennis is referring to is sometimes for, mostly for animal feedlot variances, there's been some requests from the Board of Adjustment or neighbors that there be a tree line installed. And so then we do sometimes struggle with that. And I know Vince Manderfield, who previously worked in the office, would help us with that. And so I guess I'll let Greg speak to if, you know, if they're comfortable getting into those sorts of requests as well, or simply if the Board of Adjustment will grant a variance and require a vegetative screen or buffer, would then, let's say after the fact or after the variance is granted, would the SWCD still be willing to help that person come up with a plan?
I think the answer is yes. I probably wouldn't be the person to develop that, but I could work with a couple other staff that we have in our office that would be more in line with the trees and the screening or a shelter belt, whatever you want to call it. And I think what the role that we'd want to play is if you did that as a requirement, you could tell them that you want them to come up with this screening plan or shelter belt plan, and we could develop that plan. And just know that, you know, basically this is what we're telling them that would meet those requirements, and they can kind of take it or leave it, so to speak. However you want to handle that, because we're not going to, you know, shove it down anybody's throat, but we can come up with, you know, you need this many trees, you need this type of trees, you should probably plant this size stock to begin with, and it's going to accomplish what you're doing over time.
Bonnie Mossman, the chair. I just have one suggestion is if we do come up with, you know, so that we're letting the board members know approximately how much some of these things would cost, that maybe that they be put on the staff report as a range rather than a specific amount. Because I think we can read into a range what it's going to cost, and that way later on the applicant doesn't come back saying, well, you said it was going to cost X amount of dollars. So if we put it in as a range, it eliminates them coming back then and saying you said it was going to cost X amount of dollars. So that might be a way to approach, you know, just keeping the tension off of them coming back to staff with complaints.
That's a good point, Bonnie. I mean, we can do it however you'd like. I mean, if you want a dollar amount to try to go with it, we can. Otherwise, I mean, it is very variable as far as even when we design projects on what they get estimated at from a contractor, because there's a lot of different factors as far as access on some of these shoreland lots and different material locations and who they're working with to get materials, and some of the contractors just charge more than others. So depending on who the landowner wants to shop with, you're right, there could be quite the variability in the, the cost of what they're doing.
But I think what would help is it would just let us know, is this going to cost the applicant hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, or 10,000 plus dollars?
Yep. Okay.
Are there any other questions on this topic? Or I guess my thought would be, if you generally would like this direction that we're going, what we could do is work on this perhaps for your August meeting. I'm gonna skip to August because July is going to be full the way it is, and being deadlines have passed, we would just be a little bit too behind. And certainly this isn't an ordinance change, so we can have fluid conversations about this and tweak the process as needed as we move forward.
And wouldn't it need to go to the county board before we start moving that direction too? I thought that was the discussion we had.
Madam Chair, Greg, so Shelley and I will talk to our commissioners probably as an informational item. We'll explain the Board of Adjustments request. We'll explain our discussion with your board and then the outcome of tonight's meeting. So definitely we want to inform the board. The Board of Adjustment is a separate entity, so they are able to, under statute, be able to move forward on some of these things, but we definitely want to keep the county board informed in case there's questions or concerns that are raised to them.
And I think, we can just have this as a ongoing process, because as long as we don't have a form or, something solid in place, we can let staff know if we like the information we're getting, if we need to tweak it a little bit over the next few months. Now, yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Jill DeLong. So I was just saying, looking at, past packets we've had for applications, there is that chunk that says alternatives recommended conditions. And I like how Dennis had mentioned that these are just recommendations and the board still gets to choose. And having that alternatives recommended conditions, it's just like that, where we sometimes there's recommended condition under there to, say it has to be pumped so many times, or maybe it does need water mitigation. So I really like that. As long as it's still recommended, then it still gives it to us on the board to say yes or no. That's what we want.
Well, if we're going to be involved, that's exactly what we want, because we don't want to get into the SWCD said or Greg said, because it should be just a recommendation and some ideas or concepts, and then it's on the Board of Adjustment to decide whether or not it fits, and it should go along with what they're requesting.
Well, it seems like we're all kind of on the same page for going forward. Did anyone have any additional questions or concerns about this topic?
Dave Gamrod. I would have a question that I'm wondering, some of the conditions and stuff that we've done in the past, how have they affected these projects? We see the thing in the upfront, but it'd be interesting to know what some of our recommendations have done as far as actual practices. That we kind of audit our what's happened in some of these things. Are we doing good, or is it something that we're paying lip service to that is not affecting anything?
Dave, Angie Berg, I can comment on that. So we do follow up on all variance conditions, and if those conditions are not met, including any particular condition related to a buffer or stormwater management plan, we do follow up on all of those. So what I would say is that you're not paying lip service, because we're making sure that it's done by way of complying with the permit. I can tell you that when there's been some requirements of stormwater management plans on maybe a smaller site, a required engineered plan that I think sticker shock comes to the applicant a little bit after that because they realize how much an engineer is going to cost. So I think that this will help that process. And what I would also say, Greg and I talked about this earlier, that if there's a complicated site or sites that environmental services sees that, you know what, this is just not something we're going to send to SWCD because this needs to be an engineered plan or this needs to be something else. We'll use that discretion and we'll inform the board about that as well.
Thank you.
The other thing that we can do to try to quantify that for you is we commonly, with projects on most of them anyway, we do what's called a pollution reduction calculator. And so we can give you a basic idea of what types of benefits the mitigation that you're having them do is going to provide. So that could be in the form of sediment reduction, or it could be in the form of phosphorus reduction, that sort of thing. I mean, we wouldn't want to get into a long, drawn out thing that, this amount of phosphorus is going to affect the lake this way, because that's going to be way too difficult. But at least on a project by project, basis, you could see at least what it might provide. And the other thing is what Angie said at the end is that, there are going to be some of these projects where you got the well and you got the septic and they're too close to the lake, and they've got buildings everywhere and sidewalks and different things like that. And whether or not they catch that right away or after I look at it, there's going to be some where we're just like, there's nothing we can do here unless they are willing to change things dramatically or come up with an engineered plan, because I can't just walk out there and do something simple and recommend it to you that they could do on those types of lots where it's jam-packed already.
Okay, thanks. And one thing I think we just need to remember, though, too, is when we look at the suggestions from staff, the alternatives, is that I think all of us are always inclined to look at what's the cheapest, and sometimes we need to also talk to the person that's bringing the proposal to us and say, is that something that you want? Because I know I've seen times when we've tried to give them the cheapest alternative, and maybe they wanted a different alternative, even if it cost something more, that maybe looked better, and they were willing to do the extra dollars. So that we make sure that the client is understanding, what we're proposing, so that we, bring that into the conversation before we take the vote, or before we add a requirement onto something, because maybe we'd require something that is a cheap item. They'd rather do, if they have the funds to do it and something looks better, they want to do some more expensive alternative. So to make sure we ask the clients that, because I've seen that happen with like shoreline mitigation, where we're trying to keep it on the cheap side, and they'd rather maybe put a little more money into it, and so that we don't put something in a vote, a condition that requires them to do the cheaper version.
Bonnie, I would agree with your comments, but I would amend to it, and that is what Greg said. What is the benefit of that particular project? Because the more expensive option might look nicer, but it might be less effective in reducing the pollution, and the cheaper option might be more effective. And so I think if we have both sides of it, the economics and the benefits, and then work with the applicant to find the right solution, I think that would be excellent.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that, but I just want to make sure that we don't leave the applicant's thoughts and opinions unheard before we make a decision.
Yep, agree.
I think there's two ways to address that. Oh, excuse me, Bonnie. I think there's two ways to address that, and one would, and the first is that if I'm able to, or our staff is able to meet with the landowner when we go to assess the site, we might get that input on some of that type of, influence of what they're looking for. And then you also have the ultimate decision at the end to kind of gauge what they're feeling and that sort of thing when you're looking at the recommendations and what you're going to approve or disapprove.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. That meeting, I think, will probably answer a lot of questions for the applicants.
Absolutely. This is Jill DeLong. Just like staff works with applicants to try to make variance requests be minimal, just like that roof line one we just did. I think it's very similar where the SWCD can talk with the applicant and have a better understanding of what their needs are too. I think having those conversations will only be beneficial for everybody.
Well, it sounds like we have a plan to move ahead over the next few months and can kind of adjust it as we go. Is there anything else that any board members needed to discuss this evening, or are we ready for a motion to adjourn?
Bonnie, this is Jill DeLong. I just have a question for staff on our mileage reports, but that can be after the call ends.
Adjourn.
I would make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Is there anyone opposed, or do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, do we have anyone opposed to adjourning the meeting for this evening? Okay, then we will adjourn the meeting. And just one question for staff. Are you aware yet whether we will be continuing in this format for July, or is there any news on that?
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, we are planning for both the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment to remain at Administration Center and conducting a virtual meeting. The plan eventually, as you know, is to have our meetings at the Service Center in Waite Park. Shelley and I and other supervisors viewed that space today, and it's very lovely. It's going to be set up a lot better than it had been. However, the technology isn't ready to go. And the other challenge that we're going to have out there is not being able to social distance appropriately. And so what Bonnie and I can see in the boardroom right now is that they've actually added on to the dais here so that there is room here to socially distance in the event that we would choose to bring the Board of Adjustment all here. But my thought to you today would be plan on being exactly where you are tonight at your July meeting, which is at your house, or in Bonnie's case, here at Admin Center.
Okay, I think that just helps us all with planning, knowing what's coming on down the board. And I hope eventually we'll be able to be back to in person, because I've heard a few comments from applicants and board members that it's just not the same. And but I know, we have to do what we got to do. So, well, we'll all see you next month then. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good night.
Question for staff. For the mileage sheets, do I just scan this and email it to Lori, or how do I do that?
Yeah, Jill, that works out just fine. Yep, you can take a picture of it with your phone or scan it if you have a copier, and then send it to Lori. Yep.
Okay, thank you. You guys have a good night, and thanks so much, Angie. I really appreciate all your work on getting Greg to do that presentation, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the idea, and I appreciate your guys' patience. I know we talked about it, I think maybe in February.